So yeah, thank you all for joining for this conversation about what it takes to keep our EPRV instruments running. I think a lot of us are happily on the receiving end of very high quality, very nice data from these instruments and don't necessarily think about the many, many hours of work that go into maintaining these and babysitting and keeping them happy. So I thought this would be an interesting topic so that everyone can understand a little bit more about that type of maintenance and oversight. And then also so that we can hear from these different instrument teams about what they've learned over many years of running these instruments that might benefit the rest of the community. So we'll be hearing from 5 speakers today covering 7 instruments. We'll start with a little overview talk from each of them just to give you the lay of the land and normal operations from those EPRV instruments, and then shift into some pre-selected roundtable discussion topics where we can hear how each team handles different questions and different challenges. And then we'll do some community Q&A at the end. There was a Google form that you're still welcome to use if you'd like to submit a written question that way. Otherwise, when we get to the community Q&A, we'll just open it up on Zoom and people can either raise their hand or put a question in the chat, and I'll be moderating and helping to provide those questions to our speakers. So with that, I think we are right about on time, and I will ask Sarah to kick things off with the NEID overview first.
Thanks, Jen. Let me get my screen share going.
And I'll ask, as everyone starts their presentations, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself and mention, where you're based, what your title is, what you spend your time focusing on, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I will do that. But before I do that, I do want to give a quick shout out to Jen for herding all of us cats from all of the observatories to put this event together. I hope, like Jen said, that it's a really great opportunity for all of you to sort of peer behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made, so to speak, how you go from getting time awarded on one of these instruments and then actually getting your data. So my name is Sarah Logsdon. I am the instrument scientist for the NEID instrument, which is at the WIN 3.5 meter telescope outside of Tucson in Arizona in the United States. And just a little bit more context for you on my background. So I landed at Noir Lab about a month before pieces of NEID started to arrive. And before that, I spent 2 years actually on the NEID instrument team, mostly focused on the development of our fiber injection unit, what we call the port adapter. So I sort of wear 2 hats in that I was a member of the instrument team and I am a member of the observatory team. So just adding that context for you. So in these talks, if my slide will advance, there we go. In these talks, we have all been asked the same questions that we developed together with Jen. There's a lot of content here. This is certainly not comprehensive. As Jen said, this is giving you just kind of a teaser in the sort of things that we do day to day for the instruments. This slide in particular, I'm talking about everything from scheduling, how the observations are taken, how data quality is assessed, and how you get data. That is a whole lot for a slide. I spent more time than I probably should have here trying to figure out what to add to the slide. This is certainly not comprehensive. This is a great opportunity for you to ask questions in the open session. Please, please do, or feel free to contact me offline if you have specific NEID questions. So again, some contexting. NEID was originally designed to make up about 50 to 60% of the telescope time at WIN. That's science time at night. I should note that we also have a solar feed that is taking data every clear day that we can get it on sky. But right now we're doing much more than that. We currently make up more than 80% of the time at WIN. I think this semester it's 86 or 87% of the time. WIN is a little bit unusual in that it supports both classically and Q observed instruments. And the instruments that run in Q have their own bespoke queues. So NEID is entirely Q operated, and it was a queue designed for EPRV science. And we have at any given time in NEID's history, either 3 or 4 Q observers on staff at WIN to execute those observations. Our nightly schedules are actually generated during the day. That work is led by our NEID Q coordinator, though we have several team members, myself included, that can also run schedules. When you're trying to schedule 87% of the nights, this is not something that is fair to put on one person. So we try to spread the love a little bit for Q scheduling. The Q observers can also do this. They will often make a schedule if they're clouded out one night and are observing the next night. They will just plan for the next night. Our schedule is actually 3 schedules. It's a main schedule, a backup schedule that assumes that the main schedule has been observed and what is the next best schedule, and a schedule specifically geared towards poor conditions. And we give the QO the discretion to switch among those based on the observing conditions in real time. There's a lot of quality checks that happen to the data at every phase of the process with NEWID, but I'm mostly focusing here on what quality checks happen at night. So the Q observer has the ability to plot a 2D Achelogram of the NEWID data or a 1D extracted spectra that also has signal-to-noise measurements on it for basic data quality assessment. That's everything from is there light to does the signal-to-noise make sense for this target and these conditions? They're also monitoring telescope image quality. We have the ability to do some basic wavefronts with NEWID, our atmospheric dispersion correction performance, and our guiding performance. Raw data is automatically sent through cron jobs from the observatory to the NEWID archive, which is managed by NEXI twice a day. So we have a day packet and a night packet. CALs are included in those as well. All of the pipeline processing happens through NEXI, and all of the data, including the reduced data, and by reduced data, I don't just mean the extracted, what I would call level 1 spectrum, but also level 2 data products like RVs, stellar activity indicators, things like that, are available to the PIs within 24 hours of receipt at NEXI. And all of our non-proprietary data that goes public right away. So that's all of the data that comes from our solar feed, our RV standard stars, our calibrators, are available to the public on that same 24-hour timescale. So who makes up the NEWID team? Well, first I should note that NEWID is supported through NNExplore, which is a collaborative effort between NASA and the NSF for exoplanet research. Our day-to-day operations are handled by the observatory staff. So all of the Q processes, the observing, that's all observatory staff. Our maintenance is done in collaboration between the observatory staff and some of the NEWID instrument team members that are supported through an NNExplore contract for maintenance. And also pipeline development goes through that contract as well. So we have active pipeline development, and we've had that through the whole lifetime of NEWID. Here's a rough breakdown of what the staffing looks like. I will note that these numbers, some of them have changed over the lifetime of NEWID based on needs, but this gives you a rough idea of the breakdown. So I am the NEWID instrument scientist. I spend about 0.6 FTE on paper working on NEWID, though I would argue that I spend more time than 0.6 FTE thinking about NEWID. Our NEWID Q coordinator, who is also our WIN operations coordinator and does a lot of work to keep us all going at the observatory, about half of her FTE is NEWID. We currently have 3 NEWID Q observers. Their FTE has changed a little bit depending on the needs of the observatory. Right now, like I said, we're most of the telescope time, so most of their time is focused on NEWID observing, but they also do other nighttime and daytime support tasks as needed. We don't have any dedicated engineering or software team members that are specifically focused on NEWID only, but we can call in WIN engineering and software support and other support from our other instrument scientists at WIN as needed. That's about a half of an FTE. Right now, for example, some of that support is coming from cross-training my position with some of our other instrument scientists at WIN since the NEWID amount on Sky has grown so much. I mentioned that we also have a maintenance contract with the instrument team. That team is made up of Chad Bender, who is our NEWID maintenance contract and pipeline lead. It's his summer salary that is covered. It's about 0.08 FTE, though he again also probably spends more time than 0.08 FTE thinking about NEWID. He definitely does. We have instrument engineering support, and then we have 2 pipeline development postdocs that are focusing on our continued development of our pipeline. We don't contract out most of our work, but I will note that we, through NNExplore, support a contract with Menlo Systems. They are the manufacturers of our laser frequency comb and everyone else's laser frequency comb. We have a once yearly in-person maintenance visit and then regular check-ins from a name that you might hear in other talks, Thilo Steinmetz of Menlo Systems, who checks in on the health of the comb and makes adjustments, sometimes on a daily basis, but certainly every few days to every week. Any invasive or significant laser frequency comb work where we're in the comb physically is done in collaboration between myself, our NEWID maintenance contract lead, and Menlo. So what does a day and a night of NEID look like? You can see here that NEID is very busy at basically all times. Everything that's highlighted in teal is a process that is automated. Everything that's in dark gray is something that is more manual. We're basically running a 24/7 operation. We have two cal sequences that are exactly the same, one in the morning at 6:30 a.m. and one in the afternoon at 4. In between that 6:30 and 4, we are doing our solar data collection that starts at 9:30 and ends at 3:30 in the afternoon local time. While that is happening, our nighttime data is sent to NEXI. We are a liquid cryogen instrument using liquid nitrogen to cool down our doer. That happens every day automatedly at 10 a.m. The humans come in for things like reviewing the night logs, doing the maintenance. We have time accounting and scheduling scripts, but they're run and vetted by a human. Humans are also vetting new targets and observations and approving them. We have a day to night team tag up every day at 4 to review the schedule, but also to talk about what was done during the day that might impact observations or things that happened at night that were unusual that the instrument scientist and the observers need to discuss. Most of our CALs are automated, but the Q observers also have the ability to trigger calibrations. They trigger bracketing etalons during slews of the telescope, and they also trigger our intermediate cal sequence in the middle of the night.
2-minute warning.
Thank you. I will go faster. So some questions about the daily and nightly schedule. One of the main questions is what happens if an automated step fails? That super depends on what fails, and I'm happy to give examples during open session if folks are interested. But all of our most common failures and some of failures that are not common at all but impact the instrument significantly are monitored with email alerts that are sent to team members who know how to respond to that alert. And most of the responses are very, very quick. As you'll see from all of these instruments, we monitor a lot of metrics. Everything from was the LN2 fill successful to is the observatory power stable? What are the telemetry of the clean room and the spectrograph and the port adapter? Very importantly for a lot of these instruments is our calibration performance. We spend a lot of time especially monitoring the health of the laser frequency comb and whether it's operating as expected. We don't monitor RV performance in real time per se, in that we don't have a real-time RV that the observers are looking at, but there's a lot of behind the scenes monitoring of the RV performance from the observatory perspective and also from the instrument team and science team perspective. Who makes the call if the instrument is going on sky at night? That's usually the instrument scientist, though I certainly take input from other team members as needed on various subsystems. And when is that call made? That also depends on the issue, as early as possible. But sometimes, luckily, rarely, this can be as late as during afternoon cals if we have a problem with one of our calibrators, for example. So just a tip to the PIs, if you have ready to go low precision targets, you can sometimes get beautiful data in excellent conditions when we're not quite ready to do high precision science. So a little plug to put those low precision targets in. Lessons learned. The first is that EPRV instruments are truly a paradigm shift for observatory observations. These instruments are on all of the time. These aren't instruments then when they're not observing, they just sit in the corner. We're trying to get long baseline stability over years. That means that even if the instrument isn't observing at night, a lot of us are taking solar data in the daytime. And even if we're not taking solar data, NEID is taking afternoon and morning cals to monitor instrument performance. That is a lot of an uptick in the need for facility infrastructure, both hardware and software, and personnel support. For NEID, that is translated into continuous reassessment of what is automated and what needs to be automated. We really try to automate everything we can. For critical systems, we have a backup plan for the backup plan. Sort of along those same lines, these instruments are complex ecosystems. They're not just spectrographs that sit in the basement of the telescope. All of the little things really do matter. The subtle changes to any subsystem have notable impacts or can have notable impacts on the RVs that need to be characterized and monitored. And NEID continues to rely on a broad range of expertise, both from the instrument team and the observatory staff, to do that maintaining and monitoring and improving performance. This isn't something that really one person can hold all of it in their heads all the time. The other lesson learned is that innovation and experimentation extend well beyond commissioning. We're all continuing to run a science experiment of how low can we go in terms of RVs. That means that ongoing development of everything, the pipeline, the calibrators, and even other hardware is critical for our success. And just another Easter egg for the PIs. The PIs that have had the most success with NEID are the PIs who aren't shy about communicating with the observatory about this complex ecosystem. If you don't understand something or you have a question, please email us. I really want to help you achieve your best science possible. So that's NEID. Thank you all.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. Andy, you're up next, so I'll ask you to maybe get situated with presenting. If there's a quick question someone in the audience would like to raise now via the raise hands, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, as Sarah mentioned, we were going to have a kind of open discussion and Q&A later on, so we can also wait for that.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see an immediate hand, so Andy, why don't we shift to you so we try and stay on time? Please take it away.
Okay. I'm Andy Szymkowiak. I'm a senior research scientist in the physics department at Yale. I still don't consider myself much of an EPRV expert, although maybe that's creeping up. But for that reason, I'm going to invite John and Lily, who I see are here, to feel free to interrupt me. And evidently, I'm not smart enough to advance the slides. Okay, there we go. Here's just a picture of the insides of EXPRES. This vacuum chamber, this rectangular vacuum chamber, stands about 5 feet off the floor. It's a one-arm optical spectrograph. Oops. I need to go back because I double-clicked. Okay. So who maintains the instrument? That's addressed much more on a later slide. And by the way, I should mention that some of my slides have lots of words on, and I'm not going to read them all. I put them here so they'd be in the record, but they're more for background. So I'm not skipping them just because I was over-optimistic. We do one scheduled maintenance during monsoon shutdown, and then other repairs and operations on an as-needed basis. So the nightly schedule, we are working in the classical observing mode, not in the Q mode. Before the semester starts, all the people who are going to use EXPRES have put in requests for their time. LDT staff gives away nights. One of the advantages of LDT is it's able to switch instruments quickly. So in order to achieve high cadence, we're often getting our standard allocation is a quarter night, and occasionally we have even observations during an 8th night. The bulk of EXPRES observing is spent for the 100 Earth survey, and we want to achieve good observations, particularly of high priority sources. And so every night the observer has that prioritized list, knows what's up and what's overhead with low air mass, and then uses a spreadsheet which shows the history of observations of that source. Because of the way weather and other things work, we want to make sure that we're getting good coverage. This could probably be automated in some way, but right now we're mostly doing that by hand. Okay, so I took this, given the template, I just left the questions in and then addressed them rather than summarize. So one thing that's helping us now is when we installed the solar observation telescope, that has all been automated. And every morning we get a plot of the previous day's RVs of the sun. put into our Slack. And looking at that is how mostly how I'm checking that things are working. I'll talk more about solar observing in a little while. When the night observer is running, the software checks to make sure that each file gets written successfully and actually has non-zero numbers in it. And during the night, as we're taking thorium argon discharge lamp observations and running LFC frames, we have a web page which records the current state of those things. I'll mention more about that in a minute. The data comes off the network, comes off the mountain over one of the two LDT network links. We actually don't move the night data until later in the day because we were trying to distribute the load on their network when it wasn't so good. And then it's going to a NAS at Yale, a NAS at Mars Hill at Lowell, and just San Francisco State University where John is. Lowell is currently running our analysis pipeline on all the data. All the night data is also run through the pipeline at Yale. And so here's a few things about the pipeline runs. So I didn't actually list FTE numbers because they seem very mutable and uncertain. And we don't really have role titles like instrument manager or anything. And so here's one of those lists that I may not go all through. This is Deborah Fisher, the PI. She runs her custom chunk by chunk extraction to get our most accurate RVs. I spend most of my time making sure that things are happening and working. John Brewer, who made most of our real-time system, or handles database issues and nightly target list generation. The target list, this is not a Q script. This is when we have outside users, we need to have their targets put into our database system. Lily is toiling away on making sure that we're getting the best RVs that we can get. And you may have seen her recent paper about our discovery of systematic changes to a very small level to our PSF with time and environment. I'll say more about that. Joe Lama runs the solar program and helps support our activities and oversees the postdocs and reductions for the LDT partner observers. I say the entire team is working on tool development and analysis tasks. And then this is Olivia Weiss, who was at Yale as our chief 100 Earths survey observer. She's now hired by LDT as a TO and an express observer. And she has been very helpful in helping to train new observers and helping to resolve problems during the night so they don't always call me. Okay, this is about Olivia again. And then our regular maintenance, we're all greatly in Tilo's debt, and he's on there adjusting things about our LFC. I think it's about a weekly basis for us. We have recently hired up things about our PCs and our LabVIEW now. An LDT software engineer is taking care of that, and he also mirrors and those systems. I get a lot of help from the LDT day crew. They'll keep their eyes on things like our chilled water and our HVAC, and hear funny noises. And if I need somebody to go into the room, they'll go. One interesting thing about Express compared to some of these other things is we are running a cryo cooler continuously. We do not have LN2 fills, and that helps us some with our stability. Members of the LDT instrument group help. For instance, right now we have a counter on the 10 megahertz source, which is the thing that makes sure the LFC stays absolutely reliable, because we had some questions with it, although I think, yeah. So they brought over a counter and installed it, although there aren't any problems with that since we fixed a cable. And then once a year, we have to warm up and pump out the cryostat getter for the CCD. And I usually will go out there in August, and I get help from members of the instrument team. Okay, so we have automated, because the way that the observer's front end was programmed, not only can you get it to run by pushing buttons, but an external script can cause express operations to happen. So every morning before the sun is high, we do this calibration sequence, and then the solar script tells the solar tracker to start tracking, and it takes solar exposures, and then every so often, if it has been taking solar exposures, because we're trying not to wear out the LFC, it will take a thorium-argon LFC pair. And it does that all day long until same time as NEID at 4 p.m. local. We right now we do the nighttime cals. So there's 2 sets of cals every day, if we're observing that night. So the night cals are only occurring when we're scheduled to be observing that night.
2-minute warning, Andy.
Great. Okay. So at night, there's the observer and the TO. Although the TOs do not have that many functions, except they mainly need to tell us that it's getting too humid. We have to stop observing. And so at the beginning of the night, they run a wavefront, tell us what the scene is. Okay. The observing system is fairly automatic. We do have to trim up after a slew to get the target onto the fiber by hand using the paddle. But then from then you can just pick one of your targets from your list, and it will have parameters which say whether or not you wanted to do a fixed time, or stop at a number of counts, or stop at when a particular signal to noise ratio has been obtained. And the humans are also inserting how often they want a new LFC run. And so this is an example of one of those things I'm not going to read to you all, but it discusses all the tasks that the human observer has to do. This makes it look a little harder than it actually is, but it's just like most classical observing. Okay. Since the only automated states are the beginning of night calibrations, the observers at the beginning of the night sees if they happened, and if they hadn't, would do them, and could do them at the end of the run if necessary, after our time when the telescope is over. So what telemetry metrics are used to determine if the EPRV instrument can perform high precision work. This is mostly for us. The agitator's the observer's going to make the call based on whether the LFC or agitator are not working, which would be unusual, or if the seeing is bad, so we can't get the source exposures we need during a time during which the Earth moves sufficiently to make EPRV estimates difficult. Okay. What have we realized? So I wanted to get the lessons learned. I'm sorry if I'm pushing my time. We have done several things to tune up our science return, because we've discovered during these 6 years that high cadence may be more important, especially since all these stars seem to have so many darn planets. And and we've changed how much exposures we need and things like that. We've also needed to have more lists of bad condition targets. Okay. I'm almost done. What do we wish that we'd known sooner? The main thing is that we wish we'd known what the scene statistics that would be achieved during the EXPRES era actually were. I have a suspicion, although I don't have any proof, that they have gotten worse, probably because of climate change. And we sort of wish the whole instrument had been built with a larger diameter fiber so that we could get the equivalent signal noise and shorter exposures. We've also found that it's very important to be following a list of targets that don't have big noise or big planets. And this is what we're using in order to identify these tiny systematic shifts that we have. We probably should have had better redundancy for some of our environmental monitoring systems, because we had a several-month failure where we couldn't get good temperatures of the spectrograph. And then we want to make sure that everybody else knows that EPRV is harder than PRV, and things that used to work are not guaranteed to be sufficient. And then just, I think everybody knows this now, but your LFC needs to be placed somewhere that's quiet and stable. And then, just as a funny side note, you need to know that the light from your LFC is flickering, and because we had a big problem with some 60 hertz interference. So that's all I wanted to say now.
That was great. Thank you, Andy. We don't quite have time for questions, but I wanted to let you highlight the lessons learned. So I appreciate you taking the time for that. Keep your questions in mind for when we get to the open Q&A, but for right now, let's move on to Gaspare, who's going to talk about Espresso and HARPS.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about these two instruments. Let me try to share. Do you see my screen now?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay, great. So my name is Gaspare Lo Curto. I am staff astronomer at the European Southern Observatory, and I started working with HARPS as instrument scientist since the time of the commissioning in the far 2003, to take a break to follow up Espresso from the start of the project all the way until installation in Paranal, and then I went back to HARPS. So let's see how these two puppies are doing these days at ESO. I go through the standard slides that we prepared together. So the observing time at ESO, as you know, is defined by the OPC, and it is assigned by the OPC. A schedule is made, and the HARPS and Espresso are very different here in the sense that while in Paranal for Espresso we do have resident astronomers taking care of the observations, in La Silla essentially it is 100% visitor mode. Visitors, however, are coordinating and are organizing themselves to increase the efficiency of the observations. So starting from the time of HARPS, well before NIRPS arrived, there was already the consortium built in, I would say, or coordinated a timeshare group where PIs could coordinate together and have a single pool of observing blocks of observations to choose from to optimize in this way the time at the telescope. And this is working very nicely since many years now. It is now continuing thanks to the NIRPS consortium, who's also using HARPS, as NIRPS and HARPS are essentially the same instrument these days, or can be seen as such. And as of today, more than 90% of the time at the telescope is taken by this timeshare. While in parallel, all the observations are conducted by the support astronomer, who, by the way, is also responsible for quality control of the data. This quality control is based, obviously, on the usage of a pipeline. In the case of HARPS Espresso, the pipeline is essentially the same, with a different configuration, and it is prepared by the build team of Espresso in Geneva. The HARPS pipeline originally was prepared in Python, but now is going to be soon retired with the upcoming HARPS upgrade, about which I will talk later on. Raw and reduced data are sent to the ESO archive essentially immediately or within few minutes when everything works perfectly. And the pipelines, the new HARPS pipeline, which is the Espresso pipeline, are publicly available. One important thing that I want to underline is the fact that both HARPS and Espresso and all the ESO instruments, or the instruments operating at ESO, are based on the same software framework. So when you sit in front of the Espresso console or the HARPS console, you barely notice some differences. So it's all these commonalities that make life much easier, so you know how to orient yourself as an operator or also as a support astronomer on instruments that may be quite different. One more thing I want to mention at this stage is the fact that we rely on our calibration mainly on our thorium-argon lamps on both instruments, in combination with the Fabry-Perot light source, the Fabry-Perot for the short time scales among the pixels. The laser frequency comb frames, we do have laser frequency comb both in parallel for Espresso and in LaCie for HARPS. In particular, in LaCie, we have the comb since 2015. Nevertheless, we still do not fully trust or rely on these combs. We had so many problems, and we paid a huge effort to try to understand these beautiful tools, by the way. But we feel we are not there yet. Right now, we have a student, Sara Tavella, who's working indeed to help us understanding well the laser frequency comb of HARPS and try to get the best out of the comb calibration. Anyway, comb calibrations are quite every day, so a user can download in the data, reprocess them with comb calibration if they wish to do so. But for the time being, all the data are calibrated simply with the thorium-argon. Well, team members, also here we have some differences between LaCie and Paranal. In the case of HARPS, I would say that about 0.5 FT, or well, at least 0.5 FT is dedicated by the instrument scientist to HARPS. We don't have a dedicated engineer like a HARPS engineer, no, because essentially in LaCie we are working with a very reduced ESO manpower. There are just 2 engineers. This is all. But we do have a support team from a subcontracted company that help us on the more routine maintenance tasks. This is one of the main differences with Paranal. So the engineer is only on demand. Whenever there is a trouble, I would call, as instrument scientist, I would call the engineering department saying, hey guys, we do have an issue. Can you help us here or there? Sometimes, as I'm not always on the mountain, sometimes the problem hits them first, and then they may come back to me proposing intervention or who knows what. So the normal operation is entirely on ESO staff. By normal operation, what I mean is acquire the calibrations, operate the telescope, operate the instrument. And by operate the instrument, I simply mean center that star on the fiber and start taking the acquisition. Not preparing the observation. That is done by the visitor in LaCie and by the support astronomy in Paranal. As I said before, it's 100% visitor in LaCie. Paranal it's 20%, maybe 25% visitor, 75% queue observing. So in queue observing, the pool is prepared at the ISO headquarters in Garching, but the queue that will be observed overnight is prepared by hand with suggestion, with input from an automatic tool, but is prepared and is responsibility of the support astronomer resident in Paraná. So in LaCIA for this stage, we rely entirely or almost entirely on the timeshare coordinators. Troubleshooting is very important there in that case to have the support of the build team. We realize since the very beginning that the build team is critical for our daily understanding of the instrument, understanding of the evolution of the instrument, because they have the expertise. Obviously, they built it, they have the motivation, and it's very good to keep them very close to the instrument. And this is the case both in LaCIA, maybe more informally, but also in Paranal, because in Paranal there is a team which is called Instrument Operation Team, and the PI is actually part of this team and is participating to regular meetings. Regular maintenance in LaCIA is entirely given to the subcontracted company, including nitrogen refill, which will stop. Will stop in a few months. We are considering to upgrade HARPS to a system which does not require liquid nitrogen. And once we open the cryostat, that means we break the continuity of the time series. Well, why don't we do it the complete service? So we are considering also to include a new detector and new detector electronics. So we are going to have a renewed HARPS soon. Daily nightly schedule, that is completely non-automatic. What does it mean? It means that individual steps are run by operators. The morning calibration are started by an operator. Generally, the morning calibration in the case of HARPS are started by the night operator. Once the telescope is closed, it will just start an observing block that will take into account these calibrations. And once these are completed, solar observations are started if there are no clouds. But even in the case our system is able to understand whether there is a problem and delivers a flag so that the instrument HARPS or NIRPS, as Lison will explain, will try to avoid observing when there are too many clouds. In the afternoon, after several hours, ideally several hours of sun observations with the instrument, around in the summertime, around 6 o'clock, I recommend this time, the solar sequence is interrupted, and the operators, they do an instrument startup, which is important to clean up a little bit everything. Instrument startup means that we close everything, we close all windows, we reinitialize the complete software environment and start up fresh. Some machines are also rebooted at the same time. And finally, after the startup, we have the evening calibrations. We have a difference between Espresso and HARPS here because it's really given by the way the instruments are operated from a point of view. For HARPS, we run a full set of calibrations in the afternoon, in the late afternoon, in all HARPS modes, which are only two, the ham and eggs, as we call them, the high accuracy and the high efficiency modes. There are no more modes of HARPS, so it's easy. It takes 1 hour and a half, something like that. In the case of Espresso, there are so many modes that it would take forever to calibrate all modes. And therefore, the strategy is that Espresso in the late afternoon only does wavelength calibration, which is needed for the next step, for the go-no-go. And the calibrations are made in the morning automatically by a script that is started anyway by an operator. But what the script does is it checks what kind of observations were done at night, and according to that, selects the instrument modes that require calibration. So only calibrates the modes that were used at night, plus our baseline mode, which is the high resolution mode 1 by 1. This is always calibrated no matter whether the instrument is used or not. In the case of HARPS, well, HARPS is always used, but in any case, we always run the calibration on all modes. The go-no-go decision, it is a matter of a combination of various information. First of all, the telemetry. Is the instrument thermally stable today? And if this is the case, and what does it mean thermally stable? It means some components, for example, at the level of the shell grating, they require a stability of the level of a millikelvin RMS. And that's what we are for. And if that is not the case, well, in the case of HARPS, the instrument is so kind that will send me an email saying, "Dear instrument scientist, I'm feeling a little bit fever. My temperature is increasing." So I would go and check the plot and eventually contact La CIA, the observatory if I'm not there, or act if I can act locally. And if the stability is finally compromised for the day, I would inform the observer, as in La CIA we are 100% visitor, and recommend the observer to switch to a low precision program. In the case of Espresso in Paranal, we put in place a slightly different strategy. Well, first of all, telemetry is always the case, is always considered very carefully. But we are also running in the afternoon calibration, in the wavelength calibration in the afternoon, we measure the drift between the afternoon and the morning calibration. And if this drift is above a certain threshold, the pipeline, not the pipeline, actually, our system, our software will give us a red flag, a warning. And at that point, the instrument scientist will be contacted and will be responsible to take the decision whether to offer the instrument for the night. Given that most of the time is in queue scheduling, it is a bit easier. If the instrument is not ready, well, we run other programs and there is no impact on the telescope efficiency. We just switch to other things.
2-minute warning, Gaspare.
Okay, thank you. And this is an example of the stability check of the shell grating of HARPS and Espresso. And this is an example over 24 hours. And you see HARPS. By the way, at this time, HARPS is going through a special event. So the temperature is slightly increasing, but RMS over 24 hours is still of the order of close to 1 millikelvin. It's a bit higher in the case of Espresso. I'm not sure what was happening there. But this is the kind of plot that we look at. What is indeed, I already mentioned, is what if we have to stop or to prevent high precision programs. Indeed, we observe the PI or we swap to other instruments. But the recommendation in general for the PI of these instruments is to always have a backup program that requires lower precision. You can still have beautiful data if you are not after the Earth wind, but you are happy looking for Jupiters, you can have fantastic data also with an instrument which is a little bit unstable on that day. Lesson learned. Well, I try to be as generic as possible and as less ARP-centric or Espresso-centric as possible on this. And thinking deeply about it, what I could come up with are these mostly 3 recommendations. The good performance of a EPRV instrument has a huge impact on the observatory infrastructure. It is not an instrument that is beautiful, like FORCE, for example, is a spectroimager in Paranal. I love this instrument. It's very simple and you can do fantastic science, but it is good enough that the instrument is ready now, even if an hour ago maybe its temperature were fluctuating a lot and they are still fluctuating. But as long as the CCD is at the right temperature, you don't care, and you do your great science anyway. That's not the case for our instrument. So the observatory needs to know that when such an instrument is coming, they have the requirements the instrument will give are going to be huge, strong on many aspects, on the level of availability and stability of the supplies, from electricity to cooling to pressurized air, and what next. The follow-up of such an instrument is very expensive in terms of FTEs. You really need dedicated people, engineers and astronomers, if you really want an instrument which is very stable and performing. And I find really in the years really essential is the follow-up of the build team. I already mentioned, I believe they have the expertise, obviously, because they built it, but they also have the motivation. And without it, we go nowhere. And the coordination between the team at the observatory and the build team is, in my opinion, the key of success to a good operation of the instrument. Other points that is worth to take into account is certainly we need to close monitor the performance of all the calibration sources, lamps, comms, and whatever. Understanding the instrument profile, it may be very difficult at times. We still do not understand the HARPS instrument profile. We do know it's quite stable, but we also know that it changes with time, and we are trying to understand it better to do better with HARPS. But this is really critical and definitely not easy, and this is one of the tasks that requires FTEs indeed. And also, last but not least, never stop improving the pipeline, improving the calibrator with new calibration ideas, new calibration scheme, improving the hardware that can be a fiber link, that can be a detector, whatever. But if you want to keep being at the top of the precision that you want to achieve, never stop improving. Thank you for your patience.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gaspare. Okay, we're gonna move right on to Lison next to make up a little bit of time. So again, keep your questions close. We'll get to them soon, I promise. Lison, if you are ready to share, we'll hear about NIRPS and SPIRou next.
Yes, I should be okay to go there. Okay, so I'm an astronomer at the Observatoire of the du Mont Mégantic in Quebec, in Canada, and I'm also part of the exoplanet group at the University of Montreal. So I'm an astronomer, and I'm also the lead of the instrument development at the Mont Mégantic Observatory. I have worked at CFHT for 3 years to prepare the observatory for SPIRou arrival. And then after that, I moved back to University of Montreal to take care of the management of NIRPS. So since the kickoff, I'm the project manager of NIRPS. I've been working on the development of NIRPS, going through the COVID, and then finally the arrival of NIRPS at La Silla. And I'm lucky I'm working with Gaspare all the time. So we are working together to get NIRPS and HARPS good data. Okay, so let's dive into SPIRou. Because SPIRou is the big brother of NIRPS. So the two instruments, spectrograph, were built by the same team. So not the front-end module attached to the telescope, but really the spectrograph itself. So both SPIRou and NIRPS are near-infrared spectrograph, so for PRV objectives. So they are cryogenic. So I will come back to that after that. So the two instruments have different science operation and technical operation, which I will give you a little bit more details. So SPIRou is maintained and operated by CFHT, by the observatory. So we have two, Luc Arnaud and Greg Barrick. So Luc is the instrument scientist, Greg is the instrument engineer. So they are not working 100% of their time on SPIRou, but a lot, I will say. So the observatory is working in close collaboration with the instrument consortium. So SPIRou observe around half of the time during kind of run period, so looking closely to the full moon. And the scientific goals are really defined by the large program accepted, so which go into the PRV, so radial velocity precision, transit spectroscopy, magnetic field monitoring, and there are also PI programs accepted each semester from the different partner. And so I think this, to summarize a little bit, the activity on CFHT, on SPIRou at CFHT, is to achieve the scientific goals with maximum efficiency. And this is because the CFHT has to provide to the scientific committee every year the number of hours lost to technical problems. So I think it's pushing a little bit the observatory to minimize those downtime. Okay, so let's dive into the scientific operations. So a little bit of what happens. So SPIRou begins the operation, I will say, from the TAC. So the TAC will rank the proposal. And then after that, PIs and large program teams will prepare the observing groups. which contain the target, the constraint, the mode that you want to use. And after that, so the resident astronomer for SPIRou will validate all of them. So making sure that when you select your configuration of your instrument, it's really the best one to reach your science goals. And then after that, the Q service observing team. So this is the people that will take care of all the observation because SPIRou is a service mode instrument. So this big team of astronomers, remote observer, also engineer will create the schedule, so the semester schedule, and then after that the night to night schedule. And to create those schedules, so CFHT implements a lot of software tools just to minimize the downtime or the manual intervention. So the remote observers after that will perform the observation, carry out quality control also. So remote observers are taking care of the instrument and the telescope at the same time. So there is only one person in the control room in Waimea. You can see the picture of Lisa that is inside the control room in Waimea. And so the remote observer will run also the quick look pipeline, which is a light version of the Apéro pipeline, just to check the signal to noise ratio also through the night. And then after that, the astronomer will reduce the data using the Apéro pipeline. So students are welcome to come in Waimea, even if it is the remote observer that will perform the observation, because training students will start in the control room, trying to explain to students how we observe, how complex it is as this kind of instrument. And just to come back to software tools, so you can see on the bottom of the slide, so I show a few examples of the software tools available. So to be able to schedule monitoring observation of a target. So let's say you want 2 observations of the same target with a gap of 5 hours, which could start to be complex. So we have tools to create queues during the night with those constraints. Regarding the data pipeline, so Apéro is the main pipeline. So it was developed and it's maintained by the consortium. So all the improvements are integrated by Neil Cook and Etienne Artigot. And so after each run, so the SPIRou resident astronomer will reduce the data with this pipeline. Regarding the technical operations, so sure, there is preventive maintenance that is coordinated by the instrument engineer. So Greg Barrick is really taking a good care of the instrument. So maintenance can be performed in between runs, which is good. So we have time where we can, I will say, play or take care of the instrument. And it will also monitor the health of the instrument. So after warm-up, because those are cryogenic instruments using cold heads, and we need to warm up them once every, I will say, 2 years to change the cold heads. That's the minimum. Regarding the software improvements, so those are done by the big software team at CFHT. So based on the recommendation of the astronomer, we have new algorithm to minimize the time we spend on the field recognition. So we want to make sure that the star that we put in the fiber is the right one, and so CFHT has developed some tools to help on this side. Also, CFHT developed the signal to noise mode to observe, which is that we stop the integration on SPIRou based on the signal to noise ratio. So this means that the ETC of the instrument is very important. So when the signal to noise ratio is reached, then we stop. It's count on the ETC, the efficiency. So the astronomer needs to take care of the ETC too. So making sure that this mode is really well working. As for the data archiving, so all the SPIRou data will be sent to CDC archive in the morning. So after the validation, so each observation got a grade, so 1 to 5, depending on the sky conditions and the constraint on the observation. And after each run, so the apéro pipeline is used to reduce the data. All the reduced products are sent also to CDC. And at UDM, we have a local archive also. We reprocess the data. We use LBL, which is an analysis tool to help after that the analysis of the data. So everything is stored on the Apéro exoplanet website at UDM. So let's move to NIRPS rapidly. So NIRPS is using an operation completely different. So the operation and the maintenance is made by the instrument consortium in close collaboration with ESO, as Gaspare said before. So we have 2 instruments to operate simultaneously. The scientific goals are also EPRV, so monitoring targets, transit, atmosphere, and we add to that PI programs. And this is why we have this kind of timeshare agreement at ESO, so that if you got some accepted program for PRV objective, so those PI programs are invited to join the timeshare group so that their allocation time can be merged to the GTO. And this allows to improve the monitoring windows to better achieve the scientific goals. So this is a really great agreement, so to help everyone and have the best science of the observation. Regarding the science operations, so a telescope operator will launch the calibration morning and afternoon, monitor the instrument through Grafana telemetry, operates also Helios. So Helios is our small telescope, sun's telescope that's feed after that HARPS and NIRPS. So NIRPS is using nighttime and daytime, which make a complex puzzle for maintenance. But except of that, we are getting a really nice data. So regarding observer, so as Gaspare said, so it's a classical visitor mode. So observers can be on-site or remote. They will prepare the night schedule based on the GTO observation and PI observing blocks. And they will also respect the fraction of time allocated per program inside the run. There is no OB's verification by the observer. So it means that if you make a mistake not using the right configuration or the constraint, then sadly it's a time loss. So the observer will perform the observation, and then after that, and during the night, so it will run the DRS, so HARPS and NIRPS all together, get some quality control flag and signal to noise ratio value. And simultaneously, at UDM, we have a babysitter club. Which is that it's a student, so it's all the master and PhD students that will also take care of the health of the instrument. So this babysitter club is coordinated by Neil Cook. And so those students will take care of the quality flag, the instrument health, the calibration. So just checking the data, playing with the data to better know what you have in hands. And then they will run also the Apéro pipeline at UDM. All data are archival, so on the ESO website, and also on or on archive for the Apéro reduced product LBL too.
2-minute warning, Lisa?
Yeah. Okay, so as for the technical operations, so we have help at La CIA, but the instrument consortium is really taking care a lot with Gaspare's help. We science and technical operations really rely on the observer night log, which is very important. So if there is a power outage, something happens, so we need to know, and this will trigger some actions during the day. So if I just compare really roughly the team members, so for sure SPIRou has more employees at the observatory, so it's a service mode instrument. So more effort is put for the preventive maintenance, and students can work on the data, but they will not work on the operation side. And if we look at NIRPS, then we have the instrument consortium really active. We have weekly meeting to discuss data, instrument efficiency, operations. So students are really part of all the discussions and they are helping. And we are training them a lot because every year we have new students and then we continue the training. As for the daily and nightly schedule, so both are very similar, but for SPIRou, we have the QSO team, so the Q service operation mode, which help a little bit to have automatic, I will say, software to help to propose the queues also. During the night, the remote observer will perform the observation, and then the astronomer needs to verify everything. NIRPS is quite similar. So we have the Gaspare that is helping as the instrument astronomer on the ESO side. So we have this opportunity to discuss a little bit more with Gaspare and the instrument team. As for the impact or the lessons learned, so a few things important. So if you notice anything incorrect in your data, please share it. So this is how the instrument team can have a better view or global view of what is happening. PRV or EPRV instruments are highly sensitive to power outage. If we unplug the instrument, then for sure there is something that will not be right at the night. So we need to have new software tools. Database are crucial to optimize the monitoring of the target. Pipeline updates is essential. It takes time. I will also say that lots of information should be recorded into the fit setter keywords. It's much more easier after that to go back into the life of the instrument to know what happened. When did you change the SPIRou build lamp? I don't remember. So you have a keywords and then you know when it was done. Is it the reason why you saw a jump in your calibration data? And maybe the last one is the observing log. Very important to have details, a lot of screenshot, time, duration of the problem. This is so important when you try to troubleshoot the issue. And that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to our final presenter before we get into our discussions and Q&A. So Josh, if you want to share your screen. That looks great. Okay, take it away.
All right, so I'm Josh Walawender. I'm a staff astronomer at Keck Observatory, and I will be talking about the Keck Planet Finder. KPF is probably the newest instrument here that we've talked about. It was delivered in late 2022, on Sky in early 2023. For those of you that don't know, Keck Observatory, we're a privately funded observatory with a whole bunch of partners that you can see listed there. I will note that since NASA is one of our partners, all US-based PIs have access. What makes Keck a little bit different from some of the others talked about, we're a little bit similar to EXPRES in this way, is that we're a classically scheduled observatory. So KPF can be requested classically, but in order to support sort of long-term cadenced observations, we're running a new KPF Community Cadence Queue program that is specific to KPF. Those nights are scheduled with an automated scheduler called AstroQ. This is a new project out of UCLA. We're actually planning a handover of this software for just a few months from now. As of right now, the science teams still provide the observers for the instrument in 26A. I will say things are changing a little bit. The KPFCC program will be on pause after this semester while the instrument undergoes some upgrades, and we're going to recommission the instrument afterward and then bring KPFCC Q observing back online at that point. KPF is one of the most in-demand instruments on the Keck 1 telescope. And our raw and processed data go to the Keck Observatory Archive, or KOA, which is based out of IPAC, within about 24 hours. And similar to the service on the instrument, the KPF DRP is actually undergoing a significant refactor right now. So some of these details may be changing in the coming years. To break up the text, here's a glamour shot of our optical bench. KPF is interesting in that our entire optical bench and most of the optics are made out of Zero-Dur. It's not just that they're made out of the same piece of Zero-Dur. It was a single mirror blank that was cut up to make the bench, the optical mounts, and the optics themselves as much as possible. So you can see our tilted to shell grading there in the foreground in the lower right. And on the left, you can see one of our two cameras there sitting in its Zero-Dur mount, along with a whole bunch of other optics there in the background. So operations, the observatory, we have a small team dedicated to instruments. For each instrument, the observatory, there's one lead staff astronomer, so that's me for KPF. And then we have a team of engineers and technicians that are essentially shared amongst the instruments, and we can pull on those folks as needed. Regular maintenance is handled by observatory staff. Similar to other folks, we're starting up a maintenance contract for our LFC, which is also through Menlo. Because this is a stabilized PRV instrument, we actually have minimal regular maintenance. It's mostly inspections that we do, unless there's an active problem. Our cooling is currently via closed cycle refrigerator, so we don't have LN2 fills. And we have alarm systems to notify us in case there's something that requires an active response by our staff. Right now, the DRP development currently resides entirely in our user community, in the science community, and that's led by the instrument build team, mostly out of Caltech. There's a deployment of that DRP at Keck, which is what's feeding the data into our archive, both the raw and reduced. And there's a development deployment at Caltech that is the one where there's active development happening. One of the things for Keck is that because we don't have a huge team here at the observatory, smooth operations depends a lot on good communication and feedback between the observers, our science users, and the observatory to monitor how things are going with the instrument, the data quality, things like that. Like all the other instruments here, we are calibrating constantly every day. Here's a rundown of what we're doing. Basically from 7 a.m. to around 5:30 p.m. we are continuously taking data. Like others, we have a solar calibrator, so we can feed sunlight into the instrument to monitor. It's an interesting calibration source, but it also helps us monitor the health of the instrument. We actually chose our time slot for SoCal to match up as much as possible to overlap with NEID, so we can do interesting cross comparisons there. And then, when they wrap up, we can carry on for a little bit. All of that is automated, but our calibration evaluation is mostly manual at the moment. Our plan is to have the new DRP automate a whole bunch of the calibration checks. Nighttime cals during observations are at the observer discretion. We don't dictate anything. We recommend certain policies, which pretty much everyone follows. And then if we're off sky, we schedule some automatic cals during the night when the telescope is being used with other instruments. I put this chart on the right. This is our planning tool. It's basically the UT hour going vertically along the axis, and then all the lines are, as the year goes through, the sunrise, sunset, and solar noon changes, and that's what we use to plan our calibration schedule. Lessons learned. You've heard some of this before. I will say operating a PRV instrument is bad for your stress level, and that's mostly because these systems are highly coupled and fragile. So if there's a problem in one area of the instrument, I can literally watch the telemetry from other subsystems and see it ripple through. And so, everything is highly sensitive to changes. And the other thing is interesting is that unlike some of our more traditional instruments, there are tentacles for these instruments throughout the observatory. I literally had to draw up a subway map style map of where things are in the observatory for training the staff here so that they know, oh, if you have to go see the such and such subsystem, you have to go over to this room, or you have to go down in the basement, or you have to go up to the roof, whatever it is. Maintenance for these instruments can be very challenging. Our sort of sarcastic mantra is fix it, but don't touch it. It's kind of like a house of cards. If you want to go in and change something or fix it, you're going to disturb the system in other ways. So you have to be very careful about when you choose to do active maintenance. Decade-long stability is challenging in a real-world operations environment, especially on remote mountaintops. Other folks have mentioned, power and power outages and things like that. Again, you're on a remote mountaintop, so all those challenges are a little bit worse. And then, the DRP itself is absolutely vital for operations. We say for essentially all instruments, oh, the DRP is a subsystem, a critical subsystem of the instrument. We really mean it for these PRV instruments, because if the DRP isn't working well, you're not going to get good data until it is, and you're not going to know whether your instrument is capable of producing good data until your DRP is able to tell you that. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Josh. Let us take a moment and say a big thank you to all of our presenters for those very comprehensive and efficient overviews of how, their instruments work within the observatory setting. I know we asked a lot of you to try and cover that in a very short amount of time, so thank you. I'm going to kick off our roundtable discussion. We have a few questions that were identified by the speakers as being interesting, we think, for the community ahead of time. While we do this for the next kind of 15, 20 minutes, I'll encourage folks to put your hand up in the Zoom channel if you have questions you'd like to ask, because we'll transition to the community Q&A after this, and it'd be nice to have a list of who's keen to ask questions. Okay, so for the panelists, I'm going to invite you guys to unmute and they're a small enough number, I think we can handle you just speaking up with responses as we go through this. So question number one, some of you touched on this a little bit already, but what performance metrics do you track and how are they used to inform future operations? Ready to go.
Well, we already mentioned the telemetry. So thermal stability is clearly crucial. And in the case of Espresso, we are actually measuring really the radial velocity stability. So we are measuring a wavelength solution in the morning, a wavelength solution in the evening, and comparing how much they differ by how much the instrument has moved in radial velocity. And if this is above a certain threshold, there is an alarm. We try to understand why is that and make an assessment whether we can still go through the night with EPRV or not.
Our main metric is just looking at our collection of targets over time and with error bars. And if we see that something funny is going on in that, we also have telemetry records for temperatures and things, but haven't used that so much for decision making. It's more for problem identification and solving.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're very focused on the telemetry values. We have subsystems set up to monitor them, whether they be temperatures, pressures, and give us notifications, track rates of change, all of that. That's our focus.
Yeah, I cannot add more than that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, I mean, temperatures are hugely critical for us as well as power, which Lisan mentioned. The other thing that we're tracking is our performance of our calibrators over time. That's as simple as, do we still getting light from our flat lamp? What is the light profile from the Etalon? Also, we spend a lot of time, like I discussed, monitoring the performance of the laser frequency comb. That's something that the observers check every night during afternoon cals. And we sometimes even have a process of the laser comb is not locking, so we pause cals for a certain number of minutes, see if it locks on itself. If not, usually myself or Chad Bender will go in and actually make some adjustments to the laser comb to see if we can improve the output.
Very good. Okay, what is your definition of success operationally, and does that change as a function of timescale?
So ours is probably the simplest, so I'll start, which is, I'm really there to put the instrument on sky with a full set of calibrations and with, no temperature deviations or any of the telemetry issues having raised alarms. Like that's goal number one.
A respectable goal.
Yeah, that's probably the same for us.
Well,
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
that's certainly for true, and the same for us for, how can you say, level 0, so to have the instrument ready indeed for the night. But then level 1, the definition of success obviously is at the end when we get a publication and we see that we can actually reconstruct an orbit with a precision which is at the level of the requirement for our instrument. And that is really something for which we know that to understand that we are doing well, we have to wait months, if not years, monitoring scientifically interesting objects, but also it's difficult to find them. But let's say radial velocity standard stars. I say it's difficult because every star is changing, as we know. And this is clearly an index of how well we are doing and whether there are problems we have to assess if we see jumps in what we believe it should be stable.
Yeah, and I would just add that maybe the level 2 of that is, are there then adjustments that we can make to the calibrators, to the hardware, to the pipeline to push that even further? Can we take this ensemble of the standard star data, the solar data, and get our EPRV precision even better over time?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting differences, between observatories is how you handle if there's an instrument problem. So, if you're a fully Q-operated observatory, you could switch to a different program on a different instrument that night if there's an issue. I don't have that option because, if KPF is what is scheduled for tonight, I don't have an observer with a program ready to go on Mossfire, for example. So, our focus is really put that instrument on sky in as best a situation as you possibly can and trust the observer to do something useful.
Yeah, I would note that even though we have other instruments that are Q, we have one other instrument that's Q, is NESI. We don't really have the option as well to switch to many other instruments. Sometimes we can get a classical observer queued up on another instrument, but with NEID being more than 80% of the telescope time, it's not guaranteed that that other instrument is cool to even switch to it. And so this is my plug again. We rely on our backup low precision programs for nights that we can't switch even in Q. I realize that you don't always have that for a classical night, but I think it's always good for the PIs, for the EPRV instruments to have the lower precision targets ready in their pockets.
Yeah, and for CFHT, we are working on having EXPRES and SPIRou together at the telescope. So when SPIRou gets down, then EXPRES will feed. And for NIRPS, but we already have HARPS and NIRPS, and we are battling to have both instruments working at the same time. So when one is down, then we have another one. Yeah.
Okay. I like this one. If you could change anything about your instrument or the telescope or the observatory, what would it be?
Mine is easy. We've had a lot of challenges with our cooling system, so I would have a more reliable cooling system on my detectors. That's that's mine for sure.
Like John Brewer in the chat just says seeing, which I think is what Andy alluded to earlier as well.
Well, and also weather, clouds. It's not just. um, we may have an upgrade to Express in some time when we would like to put in some bigger, lower fibers that will deliver lower resolution, because there are people among the LDD partners who would like to look at some faint things. Express is optimized to look at nearby bright stars. Yeah, but there are people who want to look at faint things. So we wish we had, and we may add some other modes to use the Express hardware at lower resolutions, which isn't really an EPRV thing, but anyway. We could also we could still stand to have better HVAC control of our room temperature. It's pretty good now, but not as great as I wish it was.
If I could, I would hire more people working on the DRS side. We have so many, so Etienne Artico is not there, but Neil Cook is there. But we have too many things that we want to test and try on. Now it's almost 3 years of data on NERPS, and reducing those data are taking time. So if we could have more software engineers into the team, and so helping to speed up the implementation in the DRS and the reduction, this will be awesome.
Yeah, I really resonate with what everyone was saying, but especially what Lisan is saying. I would love to have more software support across the board to continue on that automation path. I would say the other thing that I think about a lot these days is that NEID is 5 years into operation and operating all the time. We're starting to see wear and tear on movable parts in our fiber injection unit and our port adapter. I would like to have an infinite closet of the spares. I'm starting to feel that these COTS parts that we used are not available anymore, and the custom ones are harder to get.
COTS meaning off the shelf?
Yes, sorry, COTS is consumer off the shelf, so going to a store and buying it.
Yep. I couldn't remember what the C stood for, but I was pretty sure I had the OTS. Gaspare, you've had HARPS up and running for a couple decades now. I guess you mentioned that there are plans for an upgrade and the detector improvements.
Yeah, every once in a while we end up doing an upgrade. In 2012 we did, 2015 we did the upgrade of the fiber link, because at the time they became available, the octagonal fibers that helps to scramble also the light in the fiber also in the radial direction, and we decided to change that. And now the plan is indeed to go towards a different kind of cooling from liquid nitrogen to a cryocooler, Stirling cooler. We hope it will improve the situation, because obviously we see some movements in the detector due to the cycle of the refrigerant going in. And this should not happen anymore with this new system. We really hope that this will add to the stability of the instrument, but certainly will add to the ease of maintenance, because we will have less maintenance, less people entering the room, which also means, by the way, less perturbation. But I completely echo with Lison and what was already been said, that having more manpower on the pipeline would help really a lot.
I didn't say this earlier, but we would really like to have our LFC extend further into the blue. We've been working with Menlo on this, and there's some difficulty because they made some fibers that work better in the blue for some of you, but they don't seem to work for us because our
No, they don't work for us neither. Don't worry.
I was going to say the same. Consistent blue flux is something I don't know that anybody has achieved.
I was going to say they work well for us for a while with a lot of babysitting and hand holding, and then they don't. They certainly don't have the lifetime of the redder fibers.
In the case of espresso, actually, we had this fiber that was going to the blue, I believe, up to 410 nanometers, something like that. So exceptional. Well, what can I say? In September, we changed back to the same model of fiber that HARPS is using, which is stopping around 460, something like that. And now it is more stable indeed. In the case of HARPS, we are even more conservative, and we stop at 510 because we use a different polarization and because we want to keep really at minimum the power injected and at maximum the lifetime of the fiber. So I must say, comparing the two systems, that HARPS is showing really a reliable comb in several years, while Espresso unfortunately is still fighting against many issues. I mean, laser frequency comb issues.
Sure. Okay, thinking a bit more about the communities you guys are helping to serve. So what does your user community look like in terms of, people who are really trying to push EPRV science versus folks who are keen on doing planet follow-up versus other science cases that are achievable with these instruments, et cetera? Or maybe folks who are very happy to have PRV level instead of EPRV. So what does your user community look like, and how do you communicate/support them?
Well, the community is changing also with time, right? We are moving from the time of detection to the time of characterization. Now we have thousands of planets. When HARPS was installed in 2002, 2003, there were a handful of planets really out there. So don't even think about characterizing and how could you do that. But now with thousands of them, so I believe the science case is moving a little bit. Whether it is still characterization, whether it is still a EPRV, I tend to believe so because, well, you want to be able to subtract as much as possible the telluric lines, and their precise knowing exactly what is the radial velocity helps a lot. But maybe at some point the two community may start to diverge on some of the requirements. I don't see it yet, so I believe at the moment EPRV is good both for detection and characterization.
Yeah, I agree with Gaspare. I think the answer to your question, Jen, is everything that you listed, we do. We try to hold to the most stringent requirements to the people who are really trying to do the detection and to really push the noise floor for EPRV. But we do all of that science and more. When partners can apply to use NEID to do anything. And so NEID has even observed a supernova. I mean, we do all sorts.
Yeah, for us, it's a similar story. We're doing a lot of characterization, a lot of roster McLaughlin, things like that. But we are also, supporting non-PRV science with KPF, especially as we're considering decommissioning our other cross-dispersed high-resolution Shell spectrograph in favor of KPF. So we're going to be seeing other science cases moving into KPF.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of users outside of our main group, and the ones we've had have mostly not had EPRV requirements. We've been looking at comets and planet aurorae and things, and but we have had some people from outside of the 100 Earth Survey group who have been interested in EPRV things, and it's working to supply them with data. Although we have noticed, I shouldn't make jokes, but if there's a Rossiter McLaughlin transit coming up that night, the weather's going to be bad. I don't know how the weather goes. Yeah.
I think all astronomers has imagination, so they come up with other science and the move on. On SPIRou, we had to do some observation of Venus during the day. It was fun to resolve the Venus atmosphere. And then I think what we are doing today is kind of giving the capabilities to the other sciences to think about what they could do with those machines.
And so I think Sarah and Lisa, you touched on this a little bit in your presentations, but in terms of communicating with your users, how useful is it for them to, reach out? Is there a vetting process where they reach out ahead of time to you and say, I want to do X, especially if they're not, part of the existing instrument team, if they haven't come up through years of learning the nuances of these instruments, but they're keen to do EPRV science? Is there a right person to reach out to? Is that something that you encourage them to do to make sure the project is, feasible in a sense before they put it in? Or maybe it's after it makes it through the TAC, then you want some interaction with them? For all of you, I guess, what does that process look like? Is it something that you encourage folks to try for, or, you just got to trust them to put in the right numbers and hit go?
At ISO, the key person for that would be the instrument scientist. So
Okay.
if a user has a question after the program has passed the screening by the OPC and has been granted time, generally the instrument scientist. There is also a support help desk with a general email address that can be called. But obviously then there is also personal, contact with the people involved with the instrument. But there are formal point of contact.
Yeah, I would say the same is true for us, that the instrument scientist is the formal point of contact for technical questions, especially if you're trying to do something new or novel with NEID or the telescope. In that case, I would strongly recommend that you reach out before you propose so that we can discuss feasibility. If you're doing what I would call a standard characterization or detection of exoplanets, of course, if you have any questions at any time, you should reach out. But that doesn't require as much pre-planning and forefront before you propose. That's something that can certainly happen in phase 2 when you're putting your targets and your observations into the queue. Our new queue coordinator, Heidi Schweiker, is also very happy to answer questions about how do you put your targets into the queue and what does that look like? And we both vet them as they come in. So we'll reach out to PIs if we notice anything funny about a setup. Even simple things like which OD filter do you put in front of the FabrePro Etalon if you want to do simultaneous calibrations, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, getting some interference. Okay, last primary question from the from the roundtable, and then we'll switch to questions from the audience. What types of employment opportunities exist within your observatories? I think a lot of folks are interested in, ways to get involved or maybe doing positions very similar to yours as they look for permanent career pathways. So what do you got?
I guess I can start. So Keck Observatory, on the astronomy side, there are 10 staff astronomers like myself. We each, on average, get assigned sort of one instrument to be the lead for. People come and go, so we don't always stick to the 1-to-1 ratio. In the past, all of us have primarily been generalists, and that includes myself. I did not come up through the EPRV science world into this position. There's some consideration of adding a little bit more EPRV science expertise into the observatory team here going forward as we are, learning how to operate KPF. Outside of that, again, from the science world, we have a bunch of folks working on our AO system as well. And so a bunch of them will come from the AO science world.
Similarly, at ISO, we have a very large pool of resident astronomers, mostly doing work in Paranal. and as described before, coordinating the observations and being responsible for the assurance of the quality of these observations. So the turnover there is relatively large. So almost once a year, there are openings for these positions. Generally, they are for the staff positions, 3-year position, renewable one time, and then you may have to run for indefinite. So it is a tenure track from a point of view. Also available are fellowship positions at ESO. Both staff and fellowship obviously are available in Garching at the headquarters or at the telescope. I'm focusing now at the observatory at the telescopes. Also, fellowship are very interesting. The amount of time to spend on the mountain is much less, so the fellow will not be as much as the owner of a system or a subsystem, but will collaborate with an instrument scientist. While staff astronomers will have to spend more than 100 nights a year on the mountain. So you have to be prepared to be on a remote place, Mars-like, that's Paranal, for quite a while.
Ooh, and thank you, Sarah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I put the link to the Noir Lab careers page in the chat. The links to the open positions are way down at the bottom, so scroll all the way down and click the link. NEID and WIN are part of the larger Noir Lab, so we have sites in Hawaii and Chile and Arizona. There are opportunities at all of them for instrument scientist roles, engineering roles, software roles, both daytime and nighttime roles, all sorts of things. If you are specifically looking for a career at Noir Lab too, feel free to also shoot me an email on that, and I'm happy to point you to the right people for the right sites.
Awesome, thank you.
Actually, I wanted to add one thing for Keck is that we have a program called the Keck Visiting Scholars Program. And the idea here is that since observers aren't coming physically to the telescope very often anymore, everybody's doing remote observing and whatnot, we have a program where early career astronomers, grad students, and postdocs can propose a short project and essentially get funding to come visit Keck for, say, 2 to 3 months to do that project with the staff here. So it's a 2 to 3 month visit to the observatory that's fully paid for, housing and all that. And it's a chance to get a taste of what it's like to work at the observatory.
That's cool. I didn't know that existed.
I was going to say, I don't have much to add here. As some of you may know, Lowell has decided to do some institutional rearrangements. And so, and their astronomer funding model is changing. So it's not time, I think, to think about that.
Maybe to add to for CFHT, I know that some interns can travel to CFHT. They will have, so CFHT will provide a car and also an apartment. So there is a possibility for an internship to be done at CFHT. So in case you work on SPIRou data.
Great. Okay, why don't we, with that, let's open up the questions to audience members. So anyone who's online, please feel free to use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And we'll use that to queue up some questions. Christina, I see you up first, so go right ahead.
Hey, my name's Christina. I'm a postdoc at University of Colorado Boulder. And I work in Scott Didham's group on laser frequency combs, which right now we're working on some possible blue astro combs that a lot of you may be interested in the future. But what I want to know from the panel is for all of you that do use LFCs in your system, what do you find to be the most difficult aspect of dealing with them? And what do you wish was better about them that isn't necessarily obvious?
So I want to start by calling dibs on your first comb. Um, I think reliability of operation for us is going to be the most important. Like that's the thing we're most interested in because it's a lot of work to get the blue flux out of these combs.
Great.
Yeah, I fully agree. Reliability has been the main problem for many years for the ISO systems. I believe somehow now we may have hit a sweet spot with the apps one. I'm not sure. I shouldn't say maybe. I don't know. But it is being reliable for quite a while. Um, Other than that, the other thing I would really like to have is a better stability, a better flux stability, because and background, by the way, because we do see anyway the even if we have specialized modulators that try to cut the flux at a stable level, still we see line to line variability, and sometimes we have one spectrum out of 10, 20, which is saturated, or maybe which is zero flux. These kind of things we still see every once in a while. And it would be nice to have it more stable and reliable also from the flux distribution point of view. And obviously going in the blue because all our instruments, they go much more in the blue. So going in the blue for us is very important. Moreover, it will also enable other science like fundamental constants and also the sandwich test, which require to reach the blue.
Yeah, thank you for this really important question, Christina. It's something that we're thinking about all the time. I think Josh and Gaspare really hit the nail on the head for the things that we really need. And maybe this is a secondary thing that goes away if we have the reliability of operations and the reliability of flux. But I think the other thing that I think a lot is cross-training with the observatory, making sure that the folks at the observatory really understand fundamentally how the system works, and so that when things go wrong, we know what is going wrong and why, and have the opportunity to solve it in-house would be something that would be incredibly valuable for us. That is something that we have learned over the years at gaining experience, but to have had more of a kickstart of that at the beginning of NEWID would have been really valuable and would have saved us science nights.
Okay, other questions from the audience? I'll ask one while folks ponder. So a thing that I know is causing headaches for a variety of both PRV and EPRV instruments is the fact that the thorium argon lamps that we've used for many years are not in easy supply anymore. So now we have these, ones that have thorium oxide in them, and that is causing some headaches because they're less, I don't know, similar between lamps and there's more contamination. Is that something that you folks are finding ways to address? Are there solutions to are those lamps sufficient? Do we need to do something else? I guess is my very general question.
Well, for sure, we have to try to do something else. Um, it's not sufficient as they are. I'm getting more and more worried because I'm finishing up my stock of good lamps. So getting very close. So I start looking at uranium lamps, which look nice, but I'm still a bit nervous about the number of lines available in the blue, and they're great in the red and in infrared, obviously.
Yep.
But in the blue edge of the spectrum, it's really a problem. So I hope I can manage to get a blue laser frequency comb before I end with my stock of thorium argon lamps. Yeah, but alternative lamps should be something we should look at, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the new lamps, there seems to be a lot of variety. Like we were really worried early on because we were, seeing failures every few months, it seemed. Somehow, the most recent lamp I've put in has lasted quite a while. I'm going to knock on every piece of wood nearby. I don't know why that one's any different than the others, but that's just a reliability thing that doesn't address the oxide. and everything else you just mentioned. At some level, if LFCs were perfect and reliable, maybe we can get away from lamps.
Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. We rely more on our laser frequency comb. We're also getting to the end of our thorium argon good lamps and are starting to test more and more the uranium options. We regularly take uranium neon and have for years now, and have also experimented a little bit with uranium argon lamps. And I really want to highlight one of our pipeline postdocs, Danny Krolikowski. He's doing a lot of the analysis of this work.
And how do you find the quality of your wavelength solution using the uranium lamp? Is it also good enough? 'Cause we have
Yeah,
less
so
light.
we have some of the same concerns about the blue flux, but some of the early results with the uranium neon show that the solutions are quite similar, that the errors aren't significantly larger. But I would definitely point you to Danny Krolikowski because he is really doing that analysis. The uranium argon is still in much earlier testing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John notes in the chat that for Express, the LFC is the primary calibrator and that the thorium argon is for less precise work. Is a helpful bit of context.
Yeah, I mean, for KPF, we also took that strategy and we're considering reversing that, just because of the reliability issues with the LFC.
Okay, so no pressure, Christina, but those blue LFCs would be real handy. So keep us
Work
updated.
on it. I'm gonna work on it.
Much appreciated. Other questions from the audience? You got 5 experts on the line. What do you want to know? This is your chance.
I'm going to not be from the audience for the moment. I'll be from the panel. But when I was meeting with Thilo last August and he was trying to get our blue fiber going, he mentioned that Menlo is working on many of these. There's a lot of papers out right now about ways to get flux into the blue. There's all kinds of micro resonators and poled crystals, things other than what the current generation of astrocombs they're using, which are tapered photonic crystal fibers. There are these other things which should not be as fragile when you try to run them in the blue. And he seemed to have a lot of hope that those were right around the corner, but we might be years right around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting areas that are being worked on now. We had a workshop here about a year ago. One of our partners is Swinburne University in Australia, and they have a combs working group there where they're specializing in astrocombs, or not just in laser frequency combs, not just for astronomy, but they're interested in how they can be used for astronomy. So hopefully the next decade we'll see a lot of advancement here.
Well, we tried a test with this kind of device on Espresso, and actually there should be a publication by Tobias Schmidt last year. And we realized that the reliability problems that we see with the Menlo combs may be more diffuse than we hoped for. So there is still a lot of work to go. But it is certainly very exciting because essentially you have the broadening in one chip. So it could become a very portable and much easier to control from a thermal point of view system. But let's see, there is still a lot of road to go before we can use it, I believe.
Lily, go right ahead.
Yeah, allow me to ask a question from deep trauma. I think Andy noted that recently with Express, we found this coherent signal by looking at all the targets. And it's something that took us a while to diagnose and wasn't something we were doing regularly. And so I'm kind of wondering, across the instruments, is there any global look at any systematics, things like that? Is there any systems in place where you check for something like that every N amount of time? What sort of procedures are in place to address these sort of large global systematics that are really only becoming clear when we have this long time baseline of EPRV data?
Well, we do have noticed this kind of systematics looking at what we call the radial velocity standards. We're still trying to assess exactly the amount of, I mean, the amplitude of the systematics and the cause that we are still not clear. But yeah, I mean, the best tool is indeed to look to the data stream and ideally to radial velocity standards, yeah, to try to improve. Yeah.
I think when everybody talks about wishing they had more staff to work on things, this would be one of the areas. The list of things that would be interesting to investigate is far longer than the list of people available to investigate them.
Yeah, I would also say that for us, we currently are finishing up 5 years of a guaranteed time observation block for the NEID science team that is really pushing a lot of these questions about precision. And Paul Robertson is on the line, so I would also say, Paul, if you have anything to add, please shout out. But one of the big advantages of that is that there are several members of the NEID science team who are diving into these sorts of questions and looking at all of the GTO data and the standard stars, some of which overlap over these long baselines and looking for some of these smaller systematics. And to echo a little bit of what Josh said, that this is something that the observatory would also love to do, but bandwidth is limited. The number of team members is small. So we're very grateful that the NEID science team is doing this sort of work.
So a thing that Lison mentioned during her presentation was, if as a user, when you look at your data, you see something funny, like please reach out, because this is how sometimes we identify errors or things that may have slipped through quality checks. Are there specific things that you would encourage your users to check, either like in how the data is behaved, or specific, maybe not quite so granular as keyword headers or header keywords, but general, like you get your delivery of EPRV data, what should you be glancing at before saying, okay, I trust this data and I will move forward to do science with it?
For sure. So signal to noise ratio. Also, if you have access to images at the front end level, the guiding images, making sure that it's the right target that it's inside the fiber. Also, we are certainly looking at full width F max, making sure that sometimes it's not easy to make sure that this is the right target inside the fiber. But if you are monitoring an object, then for sure the full width F max should be quite similar, or CCF. Those are the primary, I think, value to.
Yeah.
Also, in the HARPS and Espresso and NIRPS ISO pipeline, let's say, they have built-in a quality control. So as a user, I would say certainly attempt re-reduction of your data. Observe carefully, are the calibrations all passing the quality controls, or is there an issue there? And is the science frame actually passing the quality control? This is also something. Yeah, in the case of HARPS and NIRPS, we can indeed look at the guiding image, which is saved together with the data stream, also in the case of Espresso. So you can know immediately whether the guiding was, not only whether it was the right star, but also whether the guiding was performing correctly and the star was properly centered into the fiber, or for who knows which reason the fiber was off center, and you know already that may indeed introduce a RV shift. And you can use it to assess yourself the quality of the observation you have at hand.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a long history of operations to, dig into this, but I would say one of the themes I'm hearing is remember all of the other observing related things that are going on. Like, for example, I've talked to observers who are, tracking a target for whatever reason, and, atmospheric dispersion correctors aren't perfect. Like they don't work down, to any elevation. And you have to keep these sorts of things in mind. And elevation affects, guiding precision, and you're seeing full width half max. So all of the like old school observing things really, really matter still. And sometimes it can be easy to forget those when everything is sort of flowing automatically and you know, get this lovely RV number out the back. So, you know, I think all of us probably package up that sort of data and feed it with the observing results, but you do have to look at it.
And I would note, this probably goes exactly against what Jen just said, but there are some header keywords that are quite valuable to check. For example, for NEID, our wavelength solution is dependent on our laser frequency comb in a lot of ways. And if the laser frequency comb data are not good quality, we fall back to more primitive wavelength solutions. And there is a header keyword that tells you which wavelength solution was used. So if you have a series of data that all look great, and then you've got one that is off by meters or tens of meters per second, it may be something to do with the wavelength solution, and that's worth checking and letting me know as soon as possible. We have made a lot of improvements to the pipeline so that the laser frequency comb data is vetted a little bit differently in the latest pipeline release and a lot better. And so that also means that there's archival data that used to fall back to a more primitive solution that is now not falling back. So I would also say if you have been taking data for many semesters, once a new pipeline release has come out, you should go back and recheck that data as well.
On a similar front, pay attention to which version of the DRP has reduced each of your data points. Because, you know, if you get a different version from your data from last year and this year, that's an important piece of information.
Yeah, I would go out on the limb and say, do not mix pipeline versions, period, the end.
Yeah, how often, so I know like NEID just put out a new version of the DRP that has some nice new tips and tricks in it. How often do your archives re-reduce data, if at all? Is that a thing that users, you know, if you have these programs that span many years or many semesters, how reasonable is it for folks to expect to have a consistent reduction pipeline applied to these long data streams?
We do have that at ISO. Obviously, it is a huge load on people and machines, so we try to minimize that only when necessary. We did it a few times, well, at least one, in the case of HARPS with the old pipeline, with the Python pipeline. And more certainly we will have to do it again once we get the new detector, because we will get also the new pipeline. That will be the official one. So the capability is there, but we try to use it with a grain of salt because it is very expensive to run through many years of observations.
Yeah, one of the limiting factors on DRP operation is reprocessing old data.
Yeah, for NEID, if we release a new version of the pipeline, all of the data gets reprocessed. It starts with the most current data and goes backwards. So if you have data from several years ago, that takes some time. The nighttime data is also reprocessed before solar, so solar is slower. But yeah, we do reprocess all of the data with each new pipeline release.
John mentions, I think we're different since we are the primary consumer of our own data. Lily will have the exact number, but I believe we have had 5 major revisions in 8 years, but not one in the last several years. Lily, not to put you on the spot, if you want to chime in on that or not.
It's a hard thing to count, right? Because it's like, what is major, what is minor, what are like some tweaks that we've done. But some of like, because our wavelength calibration is hierarchical, that does help highlight some of the times when it's like appropriate for a revision.
Gotcha. Andy, you're muted.
I think I know that we only had one instance of when we reprocessed everything, when we found an error in the pipeline and we went back to the beginning. Some of those things that Lily was discussing, we don't have to start from the raw. we can apply just the wavelength calibration part again without doing re-extractions and things.
And I would also agree with Lily and Andy that if you have a minor bug tweak, that is a case where you might not reprocess all of the data because it doesn't need it. So if a PI ever has a question, we do have a lot of documentation about releases and what they apply to, but that is another place where you can reach out either to the NextSci archive or to the observatory and ask.
Yeah, Lysone, so you mentioned NIRPS has this nice thing of there are two pipelines that are run on the NIRPS data, which allows for comparison. Does that help to inform, like, if you see shifts in one or distinct improvements in one, does that ever inform the other, or are they really kind of an independent look at the data?
Really, the first part of your question, because we saw recently, so one has a shift and the other one did not have. So no, but it was so helpful during the commissioning of the instrument. So making sure that one thing was working on one part and the other one was working on the other part. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really useful to have two pipelines, and one like the ISO pipeline, you get the data on the fly. When EPRV, you get I will say more on the monitoring aspect. So we're starting to have 3 years of reduced data on NIRPS, but 6 on SPIRou. So we can start seeing some shift depending on the pipelines you use. Yeah.
Okay, so with our abundance of FTEs, as we've all discussed, we should all also have two pipelines, is what I'm hearing.
I think it's really helpful.
Yeah.
But there is cons also. but yeah, I thought that for us it was really helpful.
No, it sounds fantastic. Absolutely. Mm. Okay, any other questions folks in the audience would like to raise for our speakers? Okay, well, if not, let's say thank you again to all of our speakers for excellent presentations. I think a really informative Q&A session here. And hopefully this has provided some helpful insights for the community about what really goes into keeping these instruments happy and functioning and producing the data that we are all so excited to play with.